Matt Brown, College League Manager for SB Nation, joining us once again on the Deseret First Credit Union Hotline, friend of the program. Matt, nice to have you back. How are you?
I'm doing great, fellas. Thanks for having me here. And real quick, please accept my condolences on behalf of the state of Utah getting kind of Dear John last night. I, as a fan of a small market NBA program that's had that happen to them before too, I know how it feels. I know it sucks.
Yeah, Jason really took that personally. So
I did. That Dear John, that reference, that's spot on there, Matt. That is fantastic.
No, it stings, man. I know you get that little flicker of hope, and then 4 hours later it gets extinguished and it hurts all over again. It's horrible. There's no other way to put it. I feel really bad for Jazz fans.
Yeah, brutal stuff. But in the spirit of a wild NBA free agency day, we are asking BYU fans to kind of open up their minds and pretend that college sports are like free agency at the pro sports level. If you could grant BYU any one player to help them go next level, which player would you send to the Cougars, Matt?
So can I steal somebody from another program?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's a good question. And let's be honest, your friends. We may not want to admit this, but in many ways, college football is a teensy little bit like free agency. Some programs have a little bit higher salary cap than others, if you want to put it that way. I looked at BYU's roster this year, and I think if they had an electric running back to replace what they're losing here in Jamal, I think that their skill position is a little bit more unproven. Georgia's got a bunch of extra backs. If they were to borrow, I think Choke, for example, to balance their offense a little bit, I think that would make them a lot more dangerous of a team. And certainly we could find some kind of back man in Utah to underwrite that. It should be okay.
Well, see, now here's where we went. Both Spencer and I went with running backs. I went with Darius Geis, and Spencer went with Saquon Barkley. So between those two, who would you pick between those two?
Oh, Saquon Barkley is such a good pick. What I love about him is that he's good at so many different facets of being a great collegiate running back. First of all, he's extremely strong. He's a great pass catcher out of the backfield. He's able to run routes, and when you get to that second level, he is extremely shifty. I think of every player in the Big Ten, like as an Ohio State fan, I am most terrified of him. So I would love for him to go 2,000 miles to the west, where I could appreciate his highlights and not have to worry about him dunking on my team for 300 yards.
Yes,
Great.
Absolutely. Matt Brown of SB Nation with us on BYU Sports Nation. We've been talking a lot about BYU and their role in independence of college football. Is it working? What's the best part about it? What do fans want more because BYU is independence? How would you rate BYU's success overall as an independent for 6 years, Matt?
I think it's fine. I understand the fan angst about it, especially with the situation with Utah and the Pac-12 stickers and feeling that you constantly have to define yourself as a program every offseason. We don't. And I go on talk radio or something in like Kansas or in the South, you don't have to what does it mean to be an Auburn fan right now? You don't have to ask yourselves those questions, and I get why that can be frustrating. But on the other hand, you look at the first 5 or 6 games that BYU is going to play this year, and you look at that over the next half decade or so, they're great. You're playing against teams that people care about. You're getting a chance to play all over the country. Sure, the bowl situation's not great. And you haven't been a mainstay of the top 25, but if you compare what BYU has to UMass or Liberty or some of these other lower tier independents, or if you compare it to what things would still look like in the Mountain West, I think it would be difficult to say that the old way was better. It's not a perfect situation, but financially and schedule wise and just in terms of fun football, I think it's perfectly fine. I don't look at this and think it's in any danger of exploding next year or anything.
That was one of the many things discussed during BYU Football Media Day, which has been almost 2 weeks now. What were your takeaways from that day?
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to watch the entire thing, but I did appreciate at every possible moment, just kind of hitting back hard the remembrance of LaVell Edwards' legacy for BYU. And that's somebody that I think nationally is underappreciated as a college football figure, not just for what I think building probably the most unlikely college football mini dynasty, at least in the modern era. Certainly a huge figure in terms of transforming college football and really NFL offenses, and somebody who was respected by nearly all of his peers. And if this season, if nothing else, gives the program a chance to remind the rest of the country about this really cool history and this really cool legacy here of somebody, I think that's a cool thing. I appreciate a couple of those stories that I got to hear on Media Day, and I'm interested to see how the program looks to that over the course of this year.
Talking with Matt Brown of SB Nation. BYU football entering year number 7 of independence, year number 2 under Kalani Sitake, the head coach, and plenty of question marks going into the 2017 BYU football season, Matt. So speaking of those question marks, what is your biggest brain buster for this BYU team for the approaching season?
My biggest question, I think, would be where this offense is going to find explosive plays. You're really changing your identity a little bit. You're losing your workhorse running back. You've got some positional changes with how you're using tight ends in your offense. You have some pretty inexperienced individuals catching passes. You have an experienced offensive line that I think we probably all agree has some real upside, and obviously a great quarterback who we know can sling the ball, over them mountains, and has this great big arm and is super exciting. But I'm not exactly sure what happens to BYU's offense if they're in passing down situation. What happens if they can't run the ball for 6 yards a carry and get off schedule? Do they have players who can get you 17 yards and get you 21 yards, pull a drive out of a slump? Because when you're, especially in the beginning of the season, when you're going against LSU and Wisconsin and Utah, some of these teams that have some of the best pass rushes and some really great secondaries, you're not going to be able to, have these 16-play drives and score enough to win. I think you're going to need some big chunk plays. I'm not exactly sure where those are going to come from this year, and hopefully BYU is able to find some answers. Otherwise, the beginning stretch of that season is going to be really tough.
You mentioned a couple of those teams, but we've nicknamed the 5 games beginning in week 2 with LSU as the Furious 5.
Yeah.
What is a realistic record for BYU after the Furious 5?
I think they can win 3 out of those 5. And if it's 2, given the way that the rest of the schedule sets up, I still think that they'd be putting themselves in position for a pretty decent bowl game. And, to win 8, 9, 10 games in the season, that's still a success, especially given, I think, some of the turnover that BYU is experiencing. The LSU game is the one, and I think that's going to be really tough. Even though LSU has some question marks on offense, and I think BYU might be able to cover that 14-point line, I have a hard time seeing how they're going to score enough. But the other 4, while they're all going to be difficult, and and especially the Wisconsin, that's at home, I don't think any of them are unwinnable. So 3, hey, that's great. 2, I wouldn't be too upset about it. 1, I think, would be a little bit of a disappointment. But all of that's possible if they're able to get some good offensive efficiency.
You watch Big Ten football very, very closely. How good is Wisconsin under head coach Paul Chryst?
This year I think is going to be the best Wisconsin team they've had here in a little while. And, one of the great things about Wisconsin, if you're somebody that, that goes on the radio sometimes, is it feels like the Wisconsin football hasn't really changed in like 20 years. You know what you're going to be getting. You're going to be getting a bunch of, relatively anonymous recruits that are coached up in a way that they have this excellent, very physical defense. They're going to lean hard on the running game. They're going to have 5 512-pound farm boys from Appleton who are going to be on their offensive line. They're going to push people around. And that's similar here. What's interesting about this year's Wisconsin team is that they had a ton of injuries on defense last year, which forced some players that were a little bit farther on the depth chart to get more experience. And I actually like some of the talent they have with their offensive skill position players. Like Jazz Peavy, one of their wideouts, is not deceptively fast that we assigned to white dudes. Like he's fast. Alex Hornibrook looked pretty good as a young quarterback here last season. I think that they're going to be a little bit more balanced on offense, and they should be the overwhelming favorites to win their side of the Big Ten. Like they're a step behind Penn State and Ohio State, but I would be surprised if they don't win the Big Ten West.
Wow, College League manager for SB Nation Matt Brown with us on BYU Sports Nation. BYU has not finished ranked in an AP Top 25 poll since 2009, which to me just seems crazy because the Cougars consistently win 8 or more games. They've been consistently good, but not great. And by great, I mean finishing ranked in the AP Top 25. So what has to happen this year in terms of number of wins in their 13 regular season games for BYU to be ranked at the end of the regular season?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And what's kind of frustrating about that metric, even though it's obviously one that a lot of fans care about, is because so much of it depends on things that have nothing to do with your own performance, right? It's unfortunate for BYU because really the last month and a half of the season, they're going to be really outside of the public view for most AP pollsters. And even though BYU is probably going to win 5 or 6 in a row near the end of the year, not as many people are going to be watching. So what happens in those first 6 weeks is so critical. And then you also need a little bit of good luck. We saw this with a couple of the Texas wins, or maybe some other wins earlier in Independence, where you look at the name on the jersey and it seems really like this gigantic deal. And then by the end of the year, maybe that team only goes 6 and 7 or something, and it looks a little bit less fancy. I would imagine if BYU is going to finish in the top 25, they need to win at least 3 of those major 5 games. They can't afford to lose to any of the other G5 teams at the back end. A couple of them, like UNLV and East Carolina, I think are going to be substantially improved over what we've seen over the last 2 years. I mean, they need to get a little bit lucky. This would be a great year to beat Utah and have Utah still win 9 games. Rather than beating one of these big name teams and have them just go around 500. If they get that, sure, getting in the top 25 is possible.
All right, Matt. Word on the street is you've got a book coming out soon. Is that right?
Yeah, I can confirm those rumors. Heaven knows I've been tweeting about this enough, and I'm glad it's finally coming to fruition. My book is What If? A closer look at college football's great questions. Amazon tells me it will come out no later than July 18th, but you might be able to pick it up a couple of days earlier. And it takes a look at some of the events in college football history that could have gone one way or another, that changed the complete trajectory of how our sport is played. So there's a chapter on BYU and Lavelle Edwards. There's a look at a couple of failed conference realignment plans, a look at Tulane in the SEC and Chicago in the Big Ten, and a couple other things if you're, a big trivia nerd and a national college football fan.
Hey, we look forward to that just after mid-July. Matt, great stuff, my friend. Congratulations on finishing your book, and we'll look forward to it.
Okay, thanks. Always a pleasure to spend some time with you guys. Thanks for having me on.